Every time there's a critical incident in the police department, whether it's a SWAT incident or a hostage incident or a civil disturbance or a police use of force, one of the things we learn to do is debrief. That means try to understand what happened, examine our systems and processes, understand whether or not we in fact adhere to our training and adhere to our standard operating procedures, and then identify if we have either performance lapses in our training, or lapses in our standard operating procedures, and move to correct them. One of the things we've strived to be these last few years is an organization that is constantly trying to improve its systems, its processes, its responses, its tactics, its training, and its strategies for dealing with the issues of crime, fear, and disorder here in Milwaukee. Now, recently, there have been some understandable discussions about the quality and the timeliness of our sex assault investigations here in the city. Earlier this week, a 34-count charging document was produced in which a serial rapist was accused of numerous crimes. And although I think it's clear from the charging document that the Sensitive Crimes Division performed in an exemplary manner conducting the investigation in chief, the fact remains that in that charging document there were assertions made by some of the victims of this assailant that indicated this police department, upon its first response, had performed in a less than optimal way. Indeed, it appeared that in a couple of these circumstances, no reports were made at all, and in some of these circumstances, two of them anyway, the victims felt that they had not been respectfully treated by the officers. The investigations are clearly in their early stages, but we want to try to determine just what we did and did not do during this particular incident. Yesterday, a report was issued. The report had been requested by the Mayor's Commission on Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. It was funded by OJA. We've provided copies to you before you got here. And again, as you look into that document, there are a lot of observations made about how sexual assaults and sexual crimes are handled in the city of Milwaukee, what services are available for victims, what alternatives there are for them, what forms of support and counseling are for them. But again, as we examine the document, there were anecdotal reports from victims that comported with some of the statements that we saw in the charging document that once again indicated, at least in some segments of our victim population, there is a sense that this police department is less than responsive at the point of first report. Now, the OJA report indicates that we do pre-service training. While you're in the academy, we do training, and that's true. Our current sexual assault training for police recruits, I have to read this, they get 12 hours of sexual assault investigation training in the academy, 8 hours of interviewing victims training, and 15 hours of cultural competency training. And part of the cultural competency training is to relate back to how some cultures experience some sorts of crimes. Obviously, sexual assault is one of those crimes which is not only difficult for individual victims to come to terms with, but also, depending upon their cultural background, there may be inhibitions in how these crimes are reported, or victims from different backgrounds may, in fact, present differently to first responding officers. I think that academy training is pretty good and pretty thorough. But what is clear, and was clear to me when I read the OJA report, is that we have a generation of officers who weren't exposed to that training, and more to the point, we don't do in-service training, meaning every year officers go back to the academy, they get a booster shot of training, they requalify first aid, they requalify with their pistol, and they get training in police department procedures and changes in the law. Clearly that's a shortcoming. So, today I'm announcing to you, but I've already directed our academy director to begin. Our in-service training sessions start again in the fall, and we are going to put together in-service training on sexual assault and link it to our cultural competency training as well. Listen, we can't prevent or respond to those things that we do not know about. I am committed to thoughtful data collection and thoughtful data analysis and the use of data to inform our decisions. Incomplete data does me no good. And as a matter of simple justice, it does us no good to try to represent that we are members of the criminal justice system if we are somehow deterring people from seeking justice because of their perceived status or their perceived individual shortcomings or problems. That's not what we're in the business to do. We take an oath to protect and serve. That means protect and serve everybody. And that is why, as we examine the things that have gone right, such as the investigation by Sensitive Crimes Division, we need to be alert to indications that things have gone wrong or that somehow we have let develop in some precincts a culture that does not treat all victims equally. Again, these are anecdotal reports, and the fact remains we take an awful lot of sex assault reports, but the fact remains if we can improve, we must. Now understand, our people in the communications division are trained not to ask follow-up questions of people who claim a sexual assault. Apparently several years ago, this was a point of consternation that victims were feeling grilled by dispatchers about what had just happened to them, and this was perceived apparently at that time as deterring some people from following through on the call. So every sexual assault alleged via the telephone, regardless of if it meets UCR standards, OJA standards, or the standards of the elements of a crime, is logged in as a sexual assault. That's what they said it is, that's what it is. Officers are dispatched. Obviously, it's that first response that's critical, that those officers size up this situation accurately and that their first report accurately reflects the elements of the crime reported. Frequently, it's a different crime that's been reported. Sometimes it's no crime at all. But at any rate, it's that first responding officer who's got to get it right. If it's a serious sexual crime, immediately the folks from Sensitive Crimes Division get involved in the investigation. Their numbers of complaints accepted and looked into track fairly closely with the total number of complaints made, but they're the ones who have to determine the elements of the crime. They're the ones that are spending extensive amounts of time with the victim. Their total numbers of cases investigates tends to be far less than those that just are taken in the first place. They get all the cases referred to them. One of their major issues is to sift through them, again, matching the allegations to the elements of the relevant crime and producing the appropriate charge to follow up on. But again, all of that data can be skewed if, for some reason, people from the victim community aren't reporting it, which brings me back to the initial point. I've got two different documents in front of me that have come to me in the same week that, although neither is supported by data, just because I'm a data guy doesn't mean I have to be blind to the power of stories. All right, stories and anecdotes are a form of truth. I don't know what the total numbers are, but I know we have stories and anecdotes that indicates that there is a feeling abroad among some people that our first response is not always appropriate. Because of that, we're going to do additional training. Because of that, I'm going to continue to ask for your help soliciting two kinds of people. One is unreported rape victims, and two is rape victims who think the police department didn't respond appropriately to their concern. There's two different phone numbers. You've been nice enough to give them earlier. I'd like you to give them out again today if you please would. The Sensitive Crimes Division is 935-7402. That's 935-7402. If you feel you've been the victim of a sexual assault, please contact them if you don't feel your case has been investigated. If you feel that somehow you were ill-treated by us while trying to make a complaint of a sexual assault of any kind, our Professional Performance Division is 935-7939. That's 935-7939. Both of these divisions are under direction from me to take these complaints seriously. We'll follow up on them. And again, keep in mind the entire notion of critical debriefing. Even as I will see to it that we investigate individual allegations that we did not respond appropriately, I have an equal duty to make sure that our training and that our procedures and that our culture have not somehow contributed to responses that have not always been deemed professional. So that's the overall point I want to make. We're moving in the direction of embracing those findings of the sexual assault report that we can implement unilaterally, and we will actively solicit from the community additional information that will help us investigate additional crimes if need be, or amend or change our first responses.